Welcome to Product Momentum, a community of thought leaders and learners coming together to celebrate the product people who are shaping our way ahead. Inspired by our most pressing questions and insightful guests, we'll explore the challenges you face and offer practical, hands-on guidance your team can implement today. This is Product Momentum. Here are your hosts, Sean Flaherty and Paul Gable.
Awesome interview with Bob Moesta. I've been trying to get him on the podcast for a while. He's the guy that invented that little arrow that's on your fuel tank gauge in all cars. But he's been an innovator for a very long time. He was close to Clayton Christensen, another one of my academic heroes, Harvard professor and author, inventor of the Jobs to be Done framework. Bob has just got a lot of knowledge and a lot of information to bring to our industry. So
yeah, he's Robert Redford. He's the natural, right? Like
there you go.
I mean, that was amazing. He could go forever on any topic that he's touched. I also like. I mean, he's going from choosing college to helping you out in your career to now like the next thing he's on is helping out with relationships. World peace is in his future.
Oh, totally.
For sure.
But he definitely has a lot of great insights for product leaders. So we talked about a lot of them. I can't wait to get after it with you. Let's do it.
Let's do it. We are here today with a champion of the Jobs to be Done framework, an author, a speaker. We've got one of the books right here, signed. That's mine. No one can have that. But also founder of the Rewired Group in Detroit, Michigan, Bob Moesta. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to share whatever questions you've given me. I love the fact that I have no idea what we're going to talk about.
That's great. So I was actually doing some research before.
Okay.
Episode 12 of this podcast.
Yes.
Right, we were doing some throwbacks today.
Yes.
Episode 12 of this podcast, Mike Belcito was on.
Oh, yeah.
Talking about the Jobs to be Done framework.
Yes, I do remember that. I listened to it.
Referencing you over and over again. So we're happy to have you back.
Somebody had articulated it as like the Bill Walsh line of coaches. Like I taught him, and now he's teaching everybody.
Yeah.
I've got all these people who are
out there.
the
coaching tree.
The coaching
children,
tree.
grandchildren.
I got children, grandchildren, all
works.
people out there. I've been doing this for 40 years. So I've been building product for 40 years, so I have fun.
So you led off today by saying something like, people don't buy products, they hire them to do a job in their life.
Yes.
Right? And make progress.
Yes.
Tell us about that. Why is that so important?
So the interesting part is that the way that we were taught as engineers about product is build it and they will come. And somehow that got translated into probability that like, what's the probability somebody will buy my product? But the reality is people buying your product is caused. It's not random. And ultimately we need to understand those causes, and they're doing it because there's a problem in their life or there's an outcome that they need. And to be honest, you need to actually understand they have to make a change, which usually means they have to give something up in order to get something. And so it's studying that then enables me to actually see better ways to develop the product. And so it's starting from the demand side, going over to the supply side, but it's understanding their struggling moments, their context, the outcomes they want, and then the anxieties they have about it and the habits that they have to overcome.
I loved your quote in the talk. You said, everything's caused. We're just not smart enough to know all the causes, which makes perfect sense. Like,
but it's one of those things where probability theory has been useful when we don't have the knowledge. But the fact is, the reason why I hate it is because we just accept it and we don't go deeper to find the knowledge. And so I really pride myself on being very causally oriented and trying to basically understand that causation.
Yeah. My friends at home that are listening to this will be remiss if I don't say that it does hurt me personally to hear that you don't like if you build it, they will come, because that's how I get our poker game set up. If we get the table set up, they will come.
Well, it does. What I'll tell you is it works in some situations, but it's not necessarily a good strategy for product.
Yeah. And you said
I remember the context was baseball too. It's games. It's a little different.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. You said nobody randomly buys your product.
Nobody.
Right?
No.
Yeah.
And again, this is one of those things where it's an obvious statement, but the reality is when you talk to sales and their sales funnel, they have all probabilities.
Right.
Like, well, the probability because they don't know. And so what we've done is we've actually taken teams where we actually replace the sales funnel with the timeline and just say, where are they on the timeline and what are the forces that are pushing them and pulling them to basically say, today's the day they got to change. And so you rechange the sales from pushing the product to helping them make progress. It's a really different perspective, because 9 times out of 10, you only need to talk about 3 or 4 features. because their problem and their outcome only relate to those 3 or 4 features, as opposed to the 20 features. You add these other features, they go like, I don't think we need that. And then now they're actually...
Now it's confusing.
Now they're confused.
Yeah.
So another thing you said in your talk about this was that your customers can't even see you unless they have a frustration, unless they're already
This is the thing that's kind of amazing to me, is that like when you really think about it, it's like, I want to get people's attention, and they're like, oh, we'll make something funny. The reality is funny, they might be able to remember it, but can they remember it when they're struggling?
That's right. That's when it matters.
And that's when it matters. And this is the hard part, is marketing is trying to do almost like the blanket, let's just make everybody, we're going to say statements that make people stop and look at us. But the reality is the moment you understand their struggling moment and where they have it, you can pinpoint what you need to do. It's amazing.
Yeah. You said people don't pick. They eliminate choices.
Tell
us a little bit about that.
Picking and choosing. I did something with Todd Rose, who's the author of End of Average, and we went through this thing. It's kind of like you pick your health insurance, but you choose your auto insurance. And the difference is usually your employer gives you health insurance, right? And so with that, you actually then choose, good, better, best, one of the 3. But because it's part of the package, you're not actually buying it, you're just getting it. And so you know nothing about your health insurance. You know more about your car insurance than your health insurance because you pick it.
Okay.
And so the whole aspect is people pick things. And what happens is jobs be done, like if you really think about it, there's no choice in health insurance. Like you're getting it or you're not getting it. And you can say good, better, best, but that depends on health and a whole bunch of other things. But ultimately, your car insurance is like, where you're at. You can switch between things. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd like to throw back and go and talk about your book, because I read it years ago. And
Which
was,
one?
Learning to Build.
Learning to Build. Yeah.
It's my favorite book.
Yeah. Why? What do you like about it?
Well, you have the thing I like most about it is that you're very much like me, in that you're a visual thinker.
Very visual.
And you lay out all those visuals in the book. There's like a diagram and a contextual model.
I wrote all the graphics first.
Yeah.
And then I talked about the graphics, and then they took my talking about the graphics and put it in the book. That's how I made the book.
Yeah, I get it, because you have explained that you don't read and write.
I'm dyslexic. I can't read and write. And so I have a company I have a writer editor.
Yeah.
And at the same time, they did 10 2-hour sessions. And they wrote the book for me.
Yeah.
But if you pick up the book, it's like I'm speaking to you.
Right.
Because that's how I wrote it.
Yeah, it resonated with me, and I've referred back to it many, many times.
What part did you like the most?
The 5 rules. The 5. These are the 5 things, the skills that innovators need to have.
Yeah. The 5. So this was a process of. I've worked with thousands of people over the years, and what I did is I did a ranking of the top 10. Like innovators that truly were just amazing innovators, and I put them in a corner, and I said, what makes them so different from the rest of these? Because I'm not trying to compare these are better or different, but more like these people people have some skills that these people don't, and I can't figure it out. And I started with 7, and then I got it down to 3, but ultimately I came back to and the way that I tied it together is me as an innovator, I literally at 18 years old was told to be a baggage handler or a carpenter. And the reality is my mom said that was not going to happen. Mm-hmm. And so I had to actually kind of figure that out. So I look at it and say, I was as stupid as I was going to get at 18 years old. we probably all are, at 18. But the reality is that the fact is I had 4 people pour all this knowledge into me, and so I wanted to take those 5 skills and say, how did it help me become an innovator, but also then how do I tell stories of other people being innovators? And so that's really, and it's, the interesting part is I don't think you have to have all 5 skills. I think the team has to have all 5 skills.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Well, let's go through the skills. So, empathic perspective.
Empathetic perspective. So this is one where it's about really good innovators and entrepreneurs can see things from other people's perspective, and it's not just like the customer perspective. They can literally sit in the role of the investor. They can actually think about the co-founder and how they're going to actually negotiate with them. They can think about what it's like to be an engineer, and so though they might not be an engineer, they have this ability to play these roles, so they can almost in their head see the world from a 360 degree perspective. The other thing is you start to realize that there are people's perspective and then there's things perspective. So I think about like the flow of money. I think about kind of the different performance criteria of how do we look at this system, right? But ultimately we want to have empathy so we can actually surround whatever we're talking about from all these different perspectives so we can see. And that's, you find really good entrepreneurs, they do this so intuitively, like they've honed and refined the skill that they can literally, they almost feel like they're in your head.
Right.
Right? That's empathetic perspective.
Yeah, they can reconstruct it.
Yep. The second one is really uncovering demand. Is that where you want to go?
Yep.
Uncovering demand is
what we were talking about earlier.
I call it bread and butter, but it's the fact is like most people believe that the product creates the demand, but when you dive down the rabbit hole and you realize where demand comes from, it comes from the void inside the customer. So products don't create anything. Struggling moments create it. They fill the hole.
Struggling moments. I think you said disruptive moments was the distinction I captured.
Disruptive innovation is where you have actually underserved people to do that. But uncovering demand is about basically finding struggling moments. Where do they happen? When do they happen? Who do they happen to? And who wants to take responsibility to do something about it? And so this is where studying and understanding where demand lies and where it comes from, and how to access demand, because again, through time and space, we always end up having new context that causes a struggling moment.
Yeah.
Right? The third one is causal structures.
Yeah.
I love this one. This one is so hard to
systems thinking.
But see, this is the problem. Everybody thinks they know systems thinking, and they don't know the way that I think about systems, or the way I was taught systems, which is completely different than what they were doing. And so this is, by the way, I'm just going to say, amazing Mike. If this washes that out,
it does.
I know, it's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
But ultimately, causal structures is about how do things work. This is the curiosity of, it's a little bit of the engineering curiosity, but it's that notion of like, I like to know how things work and what we can do with it. And so it's this deep dive down the rabbit hole of, these are the inputs, these are the outputs, this is the system that I have to have, here's the subsystems, here's the super system. But it's understanding how they all work together.
How they nest.
And how they nest, that's the fun. That's the fun part. And so, like, this is one of those things where if I have empathetic perspective and I can see the causal structures, and now I understand demand, like I am set up to like, okay, I can see where the holes are, I can see what I don't know. And I fundamentally believe that most innovation is about the unknowns as opposed to the knowns.
Right.
Right? And most people build a plan on what they know. And the reality is the plan should be about finding the unknowns and solving the unknowns.
Fill in the gaps.
Find
Find the frustration points.
So that gets us to the fourth skill, which is prototyping to learn.
Right, iteration.
Iteration and basically small increments and being able to do it fast. And what you start to realize is that most of the testing that I was taught as an engineer is verification testing, not discovery testing. And so I was taught at 18, 19 years old how to do this discovery testing where I could walk into a problem. The funniest part is everybody who sees the problem, they all have an opinion and nobody has the facts.
Right.
And so what happens is I was taught a method called design of experiments through Genichi Taguchi, where I'd go in and say, I have no idea about this thing. I want to run these 10 experiments and then we'll see how it goes.
See what happens.
So it's totally empirical.
Observe.
It's all observational, and it's literally like, I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you learn way more than everybody else.
Yeah.
And so because everybody else is building one, maybe they have an old one, and then they do A/B testing. I was taught at 18 years old, A/B testing is the most inefficient and ineffective way to test anything. And that is the predominant way in which we test software right now. It drives me out of my mind.
Like there's only two possible solutions.
Well, no, because they're trying to just incrementalize it, and they don't realize they build a house of cards, so they say A or B, oh B, but they don't know why B is better. And so what happens when you get to, at some point you build this house out, and then somebody goes, ooh, we got to do cost reduction, we got to make this thing fast, and they come in and they pull three things out, and the whole thing topples.
Interesting.
And so you end up having this problem that's around that. Then the last one is the hardest one, and you need the four to do the fifth one, which is identifying and managing trade-offs.
Prioritization.
It's prioritization, but it's the aspect of what am I going to give up? Like the way I would say is, what am I going to give up on? It's not about what's important, but like this, I have to do more than that, and so this will have a bigger impact. And it's the problem is that again, we've been taught as engineers to optimize, which is make it all happen. And so people from product, people from marketing just say, do it all.
Do it all.
I just do it all.
everything.
And it's like,
Just
I
figure it
have
out.
limited resources, limited knowledge, limited time. How does I make that work?
Yeah.
And so ultimately it's tools and methods to help you frame the trade-offs and then ultimately be able to make the decision. But it
Which
is
I think
prioritization.
goes back, it's like a full loop back to number one, which is about
That's
what's
right.
going to create the best experience for the ecosystem, for
That's
the people in the
exactly
ecosystem, the customers, the shareholders, the
Exactly. And you
the
have to
team.
teach them all. You have to teach them almost like as separate. I got to think of the customer
yeah.
different than the consumer, different than the investor,
Right.
different than the employees.
Different
But
perspectives.
they all have a notion of progress.
Right.
And so we have to understand that.
We had Janet
Fantastic.
Basto on a couple of podcasts ago, a couple of episodes ago,
Yeah.
and she really laid out the thinking of like now, next, later.
Yep.
In terms of your road mapping.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
think when you get into that trade-off conversation, maybe some of those are like, hey, well, right now those can't be the focus, right?
Yeah.
And you said we got to choose what we're going to suck at.
Yeah.
Right. So we have to accept some things now,
But
we could address them
we,
next.
We can put them on the roadmap for later. And
put 'em
so I want to talk about the roadmap for a minute because
Sure.
I believe the roadmap is fundamentally flawed, and that we think about what we should be doing for the next 24 months and we lay it out and we build this as a communication tool to help everybody understand where we're going. But the reality is I would say a lot of people didn't even see AI coming.
Right.
And so it was not on their roadmap. It came out, they had to redo the entire roadmap. And the reality is AI is a solution. And what they should be doing, the roadmap that you should be talking about is the roadmap for the next 90 days of what we're doing and building, what's in production or in development, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anything after 90 days should be the struggling moments we're going to go solve, and when we get there, we're going to actually do the deep dive to figure out kind of what is the feature we're really going to build. But don't talk about the feature because it then almost makes everybody pre-sell the feature that you don't know. But if you actually frame it as a struggling moment, so if you look into it, what they did is they literally just looked for where the next struggling moment was, because every small business has a list. Here's what the 3 things that happened first. Here's what happens next. Here's what happens. And so it's literally just following their list of the shit that happens to them.
Yeah.
And so instead of trying to talk about the feature we're going to build, it's the struggling moment we're going to go after because that's constant. The feature might change 5 different times between the time when you thought
learn.
about it, when you learn, and you might not have to do it. And then you have to go change the organization's expectation of, well, we're not really building a search. We're building more of an AI. And then it's like all this bloat you have to do to fix. And you just want to go build. And so to me, I advise teams to basically say, 90 days like 90 days I can have enough vision on. But like
Beyond that,
but
it's fuzzier.
next November, I have no idea what I should be doing, but I know I have to be thinking about next November, so how do I think about it right?
Yeah,
we
and
frame-
depending on the situation, the infrastructure, the industry, the market, you also have to think about,
Oh, yeah.
if we're going to, we got to be thinking years out because we have to architect it so that we can adapt.
That's right. And so that's and when I think about it, that's like a strategic exercise,
Yeah.
which is different than the product exercise. It's like product exercise to me is one tier down because it's got to be more tangible, but again, it's got to be communicated. So roadmap should come from strategy for sure.
Yeah, I've been working with our clients on finding gaps in their hierarchical, strategic elements
Yes.
that help them articulate their vision.
Yes.
And one of the lessons that really resonates with them is that the roadmap is a strategic document.
Yes.
Right. Your roadmap should be a time-based articulation of your strategy, and it should be at the business case level or user capability level, and then your product plans
So-
and your
Fall out of
specific
that.
your
So-
90-day plans kind of come out of that.
So
right?
that's awesome because I think the reality is I think one of the most fun exercises I did is like with an organization we just sat down and said like, what's the job, like who are the customers of this? Like, and you found out there's 3 different customers of the roadmap, and they actually want different things out of the
Right,
roadmap.
right.
And so you start to realize, like, well, do I have 3 different versions? What do I do? And you start to actually have to really think through. And I actually need 2 or 3 different systems around the roadmap. But there's a roadmap for the executive team to know where it's going. But the roadmap for the product team is
Team
very
that's
different.
building it,
and
very
there's
different.
there's a roadmap for the rest of the organization. And part of it is to realize, like any overstatement of anything, has to be time to fix it. And most people don't think about this as a time-sucking document, but it is.
Yeah.
Right.
So what I've seen is you see dishonest roadmaps,
Yes.
misleading roadmaps
Yes.
that are linear.
Yeah, yeah,
right? And then we have this kind of like now, next, later
Yes.
roadmap where
Yes.
it's like, okay, we're looking at like essentially the cone of uncertainty.
Yep.
Then the third one, where we're really starting to try to push people, is communicating a strategic roadmap, where you're outlining, here are the known decision points that we've got in the future that could cause us to go in different directions.
And the logic behind why. Like the roadmap doesn't tell us why, but the strategy tells us why.
Yeah.
It should tell us why.
Yeah.
Right? The other thing, and I said this in the talk shop, but I think that changing the language of this is very important, because when we say plan and budget, it implies certainty.
Right.
And the reality is these are bets. We've never done it before. We don't know what we're doing. We're the best people to solve it, but the reality is like somehow in our minds we think we've been hired to have the answer, but we've been hired to find the answer.
That's right.
And
we're all building vaporware right now. We recognize that.
But we have to recognize and acknowledge it, and this is where this is why I think the bigger problem is when product managers started as project managers.
Right.
Because project managers are all about the linear aspect of execution.
Yeah.
And they say, well, we'll take a project manager and then make him a product manager. But a product manager is actually more like a marketer.
Right. We also, I think, don't do ourselves any service by calling what we're doing engineering, software engineering. Because we think back to historical engineering, which goes back to Roman times.
Yes.
And we think about, like, you build a bridge, you know exactly what you need to build a bridge. Like, this has been done many, many times. Or you put a car together, like in Demings in Japan. Like, you know how many nuts and bolts it takes. But software it's a completely different discipline.
So I think one of the problems is that we don't have a measure of quality of software.
Right. Well,
like a universal quality. If you look at any... We
kind of do in the behavior of the user. Like they accept it or they don't.
But there's no metrology. There's no. I can't look at a.
Can't read the weather.
But I can't look at a database and tell you how good that code is.
Right.
And the quality of that code, and in a universal way, and I think it's very similar to the food industry, where people go like, let me add a little salt, let me add a little sugar. They'll just add little pieces because it's...
like my grandmother when she cooks.
So here's the thing is, I believe it's fundamentally because it's so easy to make a change that we don't have to think about it.
Right, and that's the result is so subjective because it's really, correct. And we don't get to choose whether it's successful. It's the users.
Right.
They get to determine whether or not it's successful.
But that's why studying the users is so important, because if we don't actually understand how they're judging it, this is the other part is, I have engineers who are trying to convince customers that they should be measuring performance this way because they're really good that way. And I'm like, that's just ridiculous.
Wow, that's a distortion of how we're compensated and how we're recognized.
Exactly.
As an engineering team.
Yeah. So this book has been like
it's a great book, highly recommended.
A labor of love, and it's one of those things where the moment that all my mentors have passed, and what I didn't like, Clay was just a dear friend. He was just a friend. And the moment he died, I realized, like, I have to, can you continue his, I have to answer questions. Like, you don't realize it, but I have that obligation. So part of this is me to pay homage to them for all the things they have given me, and that my job is to pay it forward.
Yeah, I love it.
So that's
with each chapter, you actually profiled one of your
each
mentors
mentor and what
heroes.
they taught me.
Pretty amazing.
It was so special. And this is where, like, so I have a couple of new topics I'm looking at, and one of them is mentoring, and it's trying to realize that I worked for all those people.
Yeah, that's neat.
I'm not sure that I can mentor if you don't work for me. I think I can advise you.
Sure.
So there's the difference between advisor, mentor, coach. What's the difference between all them? So I'm building out the spectrum of what these are, because I just feel like trying to actually frame it right. I wrote a HBR blog post around getting the mentoring equation right, and the mentors up here, the mentees down here, and as they get closer and closer and closer, the fact is that
they should overtake you at some point.
Well, no, here's the thing is what we want to happen is that it goes like this.
Yeah.
So this happened with Clay and I. And so it was this and this. He was a teacher, mentor, but when we got to a certain point, Clay looked at me and says, we're peers now. And I said, we'll never be peers. And he's like, no. We need to be peers, and you need to push harder on me, because I've been grooming you to actually be able to push me.
That's great.
That's what mentors want out of this, is other people who can. It's a two-way street, and so the job of the mentor and the job of the mentee are two different things. And most of the time they get destroyed, because when the mentee feels like they're as good as the mentor, they just disrespect them.
Right.
And the reality is the mentor's been literally trying to groom them the entire time to be like collaborative ally.
Yeah.
So
what are you doing now to learn? What are you listening to or learning from these days?
So I'm deep down the rabbit hole on what is a good question. And so I have this, I'm working on this aspect of the anatomy of a good question, because right now I'm deep into comedy, because I feel comedy and good questions are similar in setup. And there's different types of questions, and trying to categorize questions and think about ways in which to kind of help people ask better questions. Because it's one of those things where, as a dyslexic, you learn through observation and questions.
Yeah.
And so I don't really know how I learned it, but like I want to be able to help other people do it, because it seems to be a lot of people wanting to ask better questions, and they'll almost start out with, okay, this is a horrible question. I'm like,
well, you put Clayton Christensen's quote up there on the
questions.
Questions create space for problems to fall into. For solutions to fall into.
And he would always say, like, you can talk about your product all day, but if there's no space in the brain, it literally hits the head and goes straight to the floor.
That's
and so this is where we have to actually learn how to create the space. And the only way he said I know how to create the space is to ask a question. And by the way, not answer it. So you say, how'd you sleep last night? Don't say anything else. Because if they say, oh, not well, then they can do something. But if you say, how'd you sleep last night? Need a mattress? The first answer is no. But if you actually get them to worry about why they're not sleeping well, eventually they'll get to, you know what, maybe it's the mattress. And like, oh yeah, we gotta look at the mattresses.
All right, the last thing that we asked all of our guests is, how do you define innovation?
Oh, that's great. So the difference between invention, I need to contrast it with something, because I always say contrast creates meaning. Right?
Okay.
So there's invention. Invention is like patents. It's the unique way in which to do something. Innovations are about things that change society.
Cause a change in the world. I love that.
Cause a change in the world. And the fact is this is where, and it doesn't have to be a big part of the world, but it's not, most inventions are one-off, and they can be used in one place. But people who are innovators are trying to figure out how to help society as a whole through markets, basically figure out how to make progress. And so to me, as an innovator, we have to be able to say, where do people struggle? Where's the biggest place to build the product? And how do we actually help people make progress? And you can already see how much, like if you look at the last 100 years and how much we've accelerated, that's what we're doing. It's way more innovation than invention. Yeah. And though we have technological invention.
Theoretical versus practical.
Exactly.
Applicable.
And we need the technology, but the reality is, like 9 times out of 10, a technology-led innovation doesn't really work that well. Or it takes a long,
it takes time.
It takes 20 years to get adoption. But think of ChatGPT. I mean, it came in quick.
Yeah, it did.
Right?
But LLMs have been around for a while.
That's right.
Been working on them.
But the notion is I was thinking about it. I drove from Detroit this morning, and one of the things I was thinking about was like if I just span things out, and you go like, you know, I lived when Blockbuster and Netflix both were alive. We were competing, right? And there's certain things where you can just see like, okay, this, and so can I start to look and see where people, like, can I see where they're going to be disrupted? Can I see those kinds of things? Awesome. What's another topic I'm working on? So my books revolve around two basic concepts. One is methods and tools to help you innovate and be an entrepreneur.
Learning to build.
The other, learning to build. The other one, and demand side sales. Yep. And then there's another one which is about big decisions in your life. And so
like
I have
your
a
job,
book. So I have,
profession.
but I have my first book on this was choosing college. Like how do you, like most people are talking about where they want to go, but the first question we got to answer is why do you want to go?
What's the job to be done here?
Exactly. What progress are you trying to make? And by the way, who are we making the progress for? The student or the parent? And you start to realize they're actually really different.
They're diametrically opposed sometimes.
Right. And so the first book was on the big decisions in your life is college. The second one is employment. So I have one coming out called Job Moves, which is I've been studying for 10 years, basically what causes people to leave one company to go to another company, and so many cool insights out of that. And then I'm working on how to find your partner, your lifelong partner, because I feel like social media has destroyed the whole notion, like the notion of if you think about our definition of friend and our kids' definition of a friend, it's completely different. To be honest, Facebook destroyed it. Yeah. And so that's where I feel like we got to actually start to rethink about relationships and how do good relationships really come about.
And I'm think about them, how we talk about them.
Exactly.
That's interesting.
And it's literally, I'm just going to do it empirically. I mean, there's all these books on it, and there are all these theories on it, but I'm going to start with just like, Tell me how you found your partner. When did you know? I've already started some of the research. The funniest thing is if you talk to people about, you ask them, so when did you know you were in love with this person? It's a very intimate question.
Yeah.
But the craziest part is if you interview people together, they try to make it the same time. No, it was this day. Like, no, I was here. They've never talked about it. And so I have to interview people individually because they distort their answers for each other.
Yeah.
And so, by the way, that's the cloud I'm trying to actually get rid of. So, anyway.
It was when my wife bought me Chinese food in the hospital when I had a bad infection. That's when I knew.
But you know what? But here's the thing: is she might have loved you before, she might have loved you more after. But the reality is, it's not the same time. And to be understand is like, what was it about that moment? Because you knew she cared. And that's what this research is about. Is just trying to understand, like, what was it? What were the actions that she had to do to know that she was the one? And what did you have to do for her to know was the one, which could be completely different criteria? That's the cool part. So excited about that one.
So I got to tell you, I've had you on my list for a while because I've known that you were the guy that invented that little arrow on the side of the fuel gauge in all the cars, and I thought that was, wanted to get you on the podcast. But it's been a real pleasure having you on.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for making time for us. I know you're busy today.
Yeah, this has been great though. Any chance I can help, let me know. The new book comes out in November.
We'll promote it.
Yep, if you could promote it, that'd be great. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for today. In line with our goals of transparency and listening, we really want to hear from you. Sean and I are committed to reading every piece of feedback that we get, so please leave a comment or a rating wherever you're listening to this podcast. Not only does it help us continue to improve, but it also helps the show climb up the rankings so that we can help other listeners move, touch, and inspire the world just like you're doing. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next episode.